Within a dark and menacing castle, the Demon Lord is getting ready to begin his conquest to take over the world, and to do that, he summons his 4 demonic generals: Olmandra the Inferno, Sylphid the Storm, Gnome the Earthen Bastion, and finally he summons the most cynical and soulless of them all, an underpaid Japanese salaryman. Denouski started working for his company as an insignificant salaryman, but he was hope-filled, and surely he would make his way up the promotion ladder at some point. However, while Denouski was working hard for the sake of the company, his colleagues were all kissing up to their boss, so they ended up getting promotions while Denouski ended up getting shipped off to another country to work on expansion. Upon arrival, Denouski found that literally nothing was getting done because the site had no funding. He tried to convince his boss to approve more funding so they could buy the necessary equipment, but that would cost money, so his boss refused and yelled at him for wasting money. The locals couldn't care less about the job if they weren't going to be given the necessary tools, so they left and Denouski ended up having to do everything by himself. However, after seeing how hard Denouski was working even though he was by himself, the locals were inspired and soon returned to help him out. But just when he finally got everything up and running, he had a call from his boss, and at first he thought his hard work was finally being recognized so he would be getting a much-needed bonus. But he was dead wrong. They didn't even throw him a pizza party. All he got in return for his hard work was even more work as they decided to transfer him to another country for a separate expansion project. By this point, Denouski had begun to question his life choices because he realizes that he is wasting his life for a company that clearly doesn't care about him. But while he is distracted by his existential dread, he isn't paying attention to his surroundings, so he ends up getting run over by Moped-kun. That kind of explains how he ended up here, but Denouski thinks there must have been some kind of mistake because there's no way the Demon Lord meant to summon a guy like him. However, the Demon Lord calls him by name and tells him that he summoned him here to become his new overseas manager. He's received extensive reports on all the hard work Denouski had put in. He was assigned to an overseas branch of his company, learned the local language, and gained the trust of the locals to successfully run the new business. That is why the Demon Lord thinks Denouski would be the perfect candidate for one of his 4 elite generals. Denouski is kind of happy since this is the first time anyone has ever actually acknowledged all the hard work he has been putting in, but he is a bit hesitant to accept the position of Demon General, because that would technically mean he is betraying humanity. However, the Demon Lord mentions that the position will come with full workers' benefits, and all of a sudden, Denouski doesn't think joining the Demon Army is such a bad idea anymore. On top of that, the Demon Lord actually respects workers' rights, so he won't force Denouski to accept the position if he doesn't want to. All this makes Denouski really want to join. When he thinks about it, he remembers how he was always treated like trash back in his old company, and he doesn't think trash like him deserves to have such an important job, so he is about to reject the Demon Lord's offer. But before he does, the Demon Lord yells that he can't let the way he was treated at his former company dictate his worth. That place was run by obnoxious and selfish managers who only cared about themselves, so they would never pay attention to all the work Denouski was putting in behind the scenes. But the Demon Lord won't make that mistake because he is well aware of how valuable Denouski is as an employee. So will he choose to go back to his old company and be treated like trash once more, or will he stay here and help build the Demon Army? Denouski is still a little hesitant to accept, but all of a sudden, Olmandra speaks up and says she objects to the idea of having a weak human in the Demon Army. Sylphid and Gnome also object to the idea because they can't see how someone like him could possibly help the Demon Army. The Demon Lord understands why they would be skeptical, so he decides to put Denouski through a test to show the others just how capable he really is. Denouski starts freaking out and tries to explain to the Demon Lord that he has no powers, so he can't fight, but it's already too late because Olmandra has decided to attack him at full force to see what he's made of. She heard something about otherworldly humans possessing special powers, so tells Denouski to try and stop her deadly kick. However, before the kick could land, the Demon Lord steps in front of her and stops it. Olmandra asks why the Demon Lord interrupted her, but he points out that she didn't wait for him to finish talking, so she ended up misunderstanding the situation. Look at poor Denouski over there, he got so scared that he passed out from the shock. The others are surprised because Olmandra wasn't even trying that hard, so for Denouski to pass out from an attack like that, it makes it seem like he's just a regular human. The Demon Lord tells them that Denouski really is just a regular human, and that makes them all object to the decision even more. The Demon Army is made up entirely of monsters, so if a human were to enter the power struggle between the demons and demi-humans, then he would get eaten alive almost instantly. The Demon Lord admits that there is a bit of friction between the factions of his army, But that's exactly why he needs Denouske and his skill set. He doesn't expect him to have a sturdy body or incredible attack power, but rather what he expects from him is his resourcefulness. Just then, Denouske finally regains consciousness and begins pleading for them to let him go because there's no way he can deal with attacks like what Olmundr just tried to hit him with. The Demon Lord tells him to calm down and explains that he won't be expected to fight, but the Demon Lord does intend to give Denouske a fitting exam. He explains that the demon army is currently trying to create a pact with the surrounding tribes, and so far they've managed to reach an agreement with the salamanders and werewolves, but negotiations with the Minotaur tribe has been quite difficult, so Denouske's test will be to do whatever it takes to form a pact with the Minotaur tribe. With Denouske's superb negotiation skills, it should be simple enough to gain the Minotaur's trust and reach an amicable agreement, but Denouske doesn't see anything simple about negotiating with Minotaurs. However, the Demon Lord seriously believes he can pull it off, so he tells Denouske to ask Olmundr if he has any questions. Afterwards, Olmundr leads Denouske down the hall so he can begin negotiating with the Minotaurs. But she thinks this is a huge waste of time since there's no way a human like Denouske can negotiate with Minotaurs. Denouske thinks she's right about him being useless, but the Demon Lord seems so sincere when he was talking about how much he needed Denouske, and all Denouske has ever wanted was to have his hard work recognized, so he wants to live up to the Demon Lord's expectations of him as much as he can. Just then, Olmundr tells Denouske that they've arrived at the meeting room where the chief of the Minotaur tribe is staying, and Denouske is a bit shocked by the sheer size of the room, but Olmundr explains that it's perfectly normal since the Minotaurs are big monsters. And as a fair warning, she tells him that Minotaurs are known to be quite ferocious, so if he's not careful, he's going to end up getting himself trampled to death. As Olmundr opens the door, Denouske has no idea what to expect from the Minotaur chief, but he intends to do his best to negotiate no matter what. However, once he actually sees the Minotaur chief, he freaks out. There's no way he could negotiate with someone like Tereus without instantly dying. Olmundr feels bad for him, so she offers to help him out with the negotiations, and Denouske is really thankful for the help. But then he sees Olmundr start arguing with Tereus, so he gets the feeling that negotiations aren't going so well. Olmundr doesn't understand how Tereus could be dissatisfied with everything they've provided for him, and Tereus says she doesn't understand what he's saying, so no headway is made on the pact, and Olmundr leaves the meeting room. Olmundr really doesn't understand why it's so hard for Tereus to agree to the pact now when he was initially open to the idea. Just when they were about to finalize the agreement, he started yelling nay, nay over and over again. Olmundr came back several times to see if he would agree to the pact again, but all he would ever say was nay, so she couldn't understand what he wanted. Olmundr can't possibly see a resolution, so she's going to leave the rest for Denouske to figure out, although she fully expects him to fail miserably. Denouske starts having a full-on panic attack because he thinks there's no way to get around this mess, but as he is walking through the halls trying to figure out what to do, he spots a bar sign and decides to head in to clear his head. The bartender gets him a warm towel to calm him down, and Denouske orders a drink while he sits down to think. He would like to work on the negotiations, but there's nothing he can do if the client refuses to negotiate. However, Denouske then realizes that Tereus might not actually be refusing to negotiate after all. He has experienced a situation like this before where a client was constantly telling him no, but when he looked into the client's eyes, he could tell what he really meant, and both sides were eventually able to reach an agreement. He now knows what he needs to do, so he finishes his drink and heads outside to do what businessmen do: negotiate. Meanwhile, Olmundr is back in the Demon Lord's throne room giving a report about her conversation with Tereus, and it didn't lead to any meaningful breakthrough, so she doesn't think Denouske will be able to achieve anything either, especially since he just arrived in this world today, but the Demon Lord still has faith in him, so he tells her to wait and see what Denouske can accomplish. She doesn't understand what the Demon Lord sees in Denouske, but she decides to go check up on him to see if he's alright, and when she does, she finds him in the process of stuffing several bags with hay. She asks him what he's doing, so he tells her that he intends to go have a good conversation with Tereus. She tries to tell him that it's pointless since he's not willing to negotiate, but Denouske still thinks there's a chance. He just needs to look Tereus in the eyes and convey his emotions properly, so the two of them can understand each other. Olmundr notices that Denouske looks a lot more confident than he did before, and without an ounce of fear this time, he walks into the meeting room to talk to Tereus. The next morning, Olmundr comes into the meeting room to check if Denouske is still alive, but when she looks inside, all she finds is a room full of hay, and neither Denouske nor Tereus in sight. At first, she thinks the negotiations must have failed, leading to a massive fight, but just then, Danusuke comes in and tells her everything is fine. In that case, she demands to know why there's hay all over their sacred demon castle, and more importantly, she asks where Terius went. Danusuke tells her that Terius is currently finalizing the pact agreement with the Demon Lord, but Olmundra can't believe Inosuke managed to get him to agree in just one night. He explains that he simply took the time to get to know Terius well, and that made the negotiation process really easy. Olmundra had thought Terius was refusing to negotiate because he kept yelling nay over and over, but in reality, Terius thought negotiations were going really well. Danusuke had experienced something like this before with an international client, and the client in question was really enthusiastic about saying no to him, so Danusuke thought the negotiation was going to end in failure. But to his surprise, the man then reached out for a handshake, so he realized it was all a misunderstanding. The same thing applied to Terius, so Danusuke did a little research into Minotaur culture and found out that Minotaurs always bring hay with them to act as their bed whenever they go to someone else's home. So all that time, he was just trying to ask for his hay. And when Danusuke figured that out, there were no more problems with the negotiation. Now, Olmundra realizes that she had misunderstood Terius and left him in that room to sleep on the cold floor, so she feels really bad. But Terius tells her it's alright since it was an honest mistake and shakes her hand to show that there are no hard feelings. As Terius is leaving, the Demon Lord comes up to Danusuke and Olmundra and asks Olmundra if she now understands why he wants to add Danusuke to their ranks. Olmundra admits that Danusuke really is skilled when it comes to negotiating, and since he passed the Demon Lord's test, the Demon Lord officially makes him one of his 4 generals and puts a bracelet on his arm as a symbol of his position. And as a sign of her new respect for Danusuke, Olmundra formally introduces herself to him and says she looks forward to working with him as a new friend. Danusuke is finally starting to settle into his role as one of the demon generals, and it's nice that he's got his own office and a supportive boss, but this place is still going to take some getting used to. Since he is officially one of the demon generals now, he thinks he should formally introduce himself to the others, so he heads to Sylphid's room and knocks on the door. To his surprise, a girl answers the door and asks what he wants, so Danusuke tells her he's here to introduce himself to Sylphid. The girl then coldly tells him that she's Sylphid's assistant, and he's a very busy man, so she can't let Danusuke disturb him. Danusuke is disappointed, but he knew he was bound to face some pushback from the other demon generals, so he decides to just come back later to try again. However, before he could leave, Olmundra comes running up to him because she has something important to say. The Demon Lord has another assignment for Danusuke, so Danusuke goes to meet with him immediately and is informed of an agreement he is working on. For the demon army to grow in strength, he needs the support of all the surrounding demi-human nations, and among all those nations, the Ogre tribe is particularly influential. They possess a military force equal to that of the demon army, and as a result, they could become a threat to the demon empire if they were to become hostile. That is why the Demon Lord wants to have a merger negotiation with them so they can combine their forces, but the ogres are notoriously difficult to negotiate with, so nothing has been decided on yet. However, with Danusuke on the case, the Demon Lord is sure he will be able to reach an agreement with them, so he is granting him full authority on the matter. Danusuke is glad to see that the Demon Lord trusts him so much that there's a real chance of him dying to the ogres if he goes alone, so Olmundra volunteers to escort him to the ogre tribe. However, before that, Danusuke says he wants to go meet with Gnome since she's in charge of the demi-human division of the demon army, and she might have some valuable information about the ogres. Olmundra thinks Danusuke is right, but she absolutely refuses to go anywhere near Gnome because she has generational beef with her. So instead, she says she'll go check on the carriages while Danusuke talks with Gnome. Danusuke heads out into the training grounds where Gnome is holding her daily training session, and he is impressed with what he sees because not only are Gnome's men skilled in combat, but she also keeps their morale really high. Once training is done, she turns to address Danusuke and asks what he wants. Danusuke tells her he's here to ask if she knows anything about the Ogre tribe, and she doesn't know much, but she tells Danusuke that their leader, Ogre, is notoriously difficult to have a conversation with, so he's going to have a hard time negotiating with him. There's nothing she can really do to help him on this one, and she would never want to work on anything with Olmundra anyway, so she asks Danusuke to get her out of here. Danusuke didn't even realize Olmundra had been standing behind him, so he asks her why she's here and why she's so angry. Olmundra says she already finished checking the carriages, so she came to get Danusuke since she was worried about him, but she can't contain herself after seeing Gnome, so the two start arguing, and Danusuke is starting to get worried about how much Olmundra and Gnome hate each other. Danusuke and Olmundra eventually arrive at the Ogre Castle. But before they could enter, they are stopped at the gate and told to wait until Ogier gives them permission to enter. Olmandra thinks it's ridiculous that they are being kept outside so long, but Danuske has seen this before and knows Ogier is just trying to use this to throw them off so they won't be able to negotiate. That's why it's important that they keep their cool, but Olmandra is on the verge of exploding in rage. Thankfully, before she could act out, Ogier's assistant comes out and tells the two that they may now enter, but as they walk in, Danuske notices how scruffy Ogier's armor look. Eventually, they make it to Ogier's throne room and come face to face with Ogier himself. But when Olmandra tries to start the negotiations, he tells her to shut up. He doesn't care why they are here because he's never going to listen to what they have to say unless, of course, they came to surrender to him. In which case, he might hear them out, but only if they agree to kill their chief, the Demon Lord. Olmandra can't believe the levels of bullshit she just heard from Ogier's mouth, so she's about to crash out right now. But Danuske grabs her hand and tells her to calm down because a violent crash out is exactly what Ogier is hoping for. He then turns to Ogier, and in his most polite businessman voice, he says he and Olmandra are going outside to have a brief chat. Outside, Olmandra lets out all her rage and curses the very existence of Ogier for daring to say such a thing. She's fully prepared to go back in there and tear Ogier limb from limb, but Danuske calms her down and tells her they can't react to his provocation because that's exactly what he wants. He is intentionally saying things to get them angry in hopes that they cause a scene so negotiations break down. That way, he can avoid directly rejecting the negotiation and blame its failure on the two of them. Now that she knows what Ogier was trying to do, Olmandra decides to calm herself down, but she's still really frustrated by the fact that Ogier insulted the Demon Lord. To be honest, Danuske is just as angry, but acting on that anger would only hurt their chances of success here, so they have to be careful about how they respond. With that said though, Ogier isn't willing to negotiate, so there's not much they can do at this point. Just then, the girl from before shows up, and she introduces herself as Ogier's daughter, Olulu. She knows this may come off as rude, but she has a request to make, so she asks for Danuske and Olmandra's help in dethroning her father. She leads Danuske and Olmandra to an empty room and explains that this is the food cellar, and as they can see, it has no food. The Ogier is known for its strength and influence among the demi-humans, but recently, they've run into financial trouble, and it has gotten so bad that a lot of their people are struggling to find food to eat. Danuske had assumed something like this was going on because when they came in, he saw the terrible state of the Ogier's equipment, along with the cold and empty feeling he got from the castle itself. This kind of situation usually occurs when large companies begin to decline. They make it seem like everything's going well, but on the inside, they are constantly on the brink of bankruptcy. That's exactly what's going on with the Ogier tribe, and Olulu believes that the only way to rebuild it is to rely on the demon army's help. However, her father refuses to listen to her, and on top of that, he is currently sick. They've been trying to keep this fact hidden, which is why they had Olmandra and Danuske wait outside while they prepared him for the meeting, but his condition just keeps getting worse, and soon he's going to pass away. If Ogier were to die with things as they are now, it would be the end of their tribe, so she pleads with Danuske to help her. Danuske says he understands her concerns, but he also scolds her for sharing such vital information. As the daughter of the chief, she needs to be more careful about the people she trusts, but Olulu can tell that Danuske is a good person. She's pretty confident in her ability to discern the nature of people, which is why she told him about the situation, and now she asks Danuske to help her save the Ogier tribe by marrying her. After hearing this, Danuske freaks out and Olmandra begins burning with rage, but Olulu is serious about her proposal. All the Ogiers in her tribe are as dumb as rocks, so the only way for Olulu to ensure the prosperity of the demon army is for a smart guy like Danuske to marry her and become the new chief. Danuske tries to talk Olulu out of making any rash decisions, but Olulu is convinced this is the only way to save the Ogier tribe, so she's willing to make their marriage official immediately, but Olmandra doesn't let that happen. Later that night, Danuske is sitting in his office and wondering how he's going to get himself out of this mess because Ogier refuses to negotiate with him, and Ogier wants to marry him. He can't afford to fail on his second assignment for the Demon Lord, so he decides to go to the bar in his head so he can clear his thoughts. However, this time he's not alone because Danuske's imaginary version of Olmandra is sitting at the table next to him, arguing with the bartender about which is cooler, gorillas or lions. Realistically, a gorilla is moping the floor with a lion any day of the week, but Olmandra counters saying lions are cooler because a group of lions is called a pride. As soon as Danuske hears this, he snaps out of his trance and he now has a foolproof idea of how to handle this. First thing the next morning, Danuske calls Olmandra outside and he apologizes for waking her up so early, but he needs her help so they can go do some negotiating. But for Danuske's plan to work, they need to go somewhere else first. And if all goes well, then Ogier is the one who will be begging for a negotiation meeting. 1 week later, Danuske and Olmundra are called into the chief's throne room, just like Danuske had planned, and Ogier looks pretty mad. He just found out that all the surrounding tribes formed an alliance with the demon army over the past week, and he wants an explanation. A week ago, Danuske told Olmundra about his plan to recruit the smaller tribes first instead of trying to convince Ogier. It shouldn't be too hard because just like the Ogre tribe, the other tribes are struggling with a food shortage, so they can be swayed by the promise of support. Olmundra understood Danuske's plan, but she didn't expect it to work so well by forcing Ogier into negotiations. Danuske's strategy was based on something he had to do when he was selling a product back on Earth. If he tried to approach a big company directly, he would usually be rejected, so he decided to first market to all the smaller companies and sell them his product, and eventually the big company would be forced to contact him and ask for the product as well so they wouldn't be left behind. Similarly, if all the surrounding demi-humans joined the demon army, then the prideful chief wouldn't let that go without a response. For now, Danuske plays dumb and acts like he simply offered to form an alliance with the smaller groups because they were struggling to survive and needed the support of the demon army. But that makes Ogier even angrier since he never agreed to any negotiations. Everything is going according to plan because now that Ogier has lost his cool, he is much more susceptible to Danuske's negotiation tactics. Danuske then starts explaining that the alliances weren't formed by him alone because he had help from Olulu. Ogier can't believe that his own daughter would betray him like this, but she tells him that it was necessary for the sake of their Ogre tribe. The only way out of their current situation is to rely on the demon army's aid, and as much as he may not want to admit it, times have changed. He has grown old and is currently sick, so they need to join the demon army if they are going to survive. Just then, Danuske chimes in and offers an alternative to Ogier. Instead of joining the demon army, they could form an equal partnership. To be honest, Danuske just made that shit up because he hasn't changed anything about the deal. But if he says it's an equal partnership, then the proud Ogre chief is bound to be more willing to accept. As expected, Ogier doesn't seem opposed to the idea, but he asks them to give him some time to think it over. A couple of days later, Olmundra comes running into Danuske's office to tell him the good news. She tells Danuske that Ogier has just agreed to the alliance with the demon army, and that's great news. But right now, Danuske has more important things to worry about. The Demon Lord told him to pick out an assistant for himself, so he has spent the past few days looking through applications to find the right person. Honestly, he wishes he could just pick Olmundra since she's so reliable, and Olmundra misunderstands this to be Danuske's way of proposing, so she gets a little embarrassed. Just then, there's another knock at the door, so Danuske goes to check who it is and finds Olulu there. She tells him she's here to act as a representative from the Ogre tribe for their alliance with the demon army, and she's incredibly grateful to him for his help since her father has become a lot more diplomatic ever since their encounter. She says she is willing to do anything to show her gratitude, and since she said anything, Danuske asks her if she would like to become his personal assistant. Olulu is more than happy to take the job, but Olmundra is jealous, so she refuses to look Danuske in the eye and reminds herself that they are rivals, so she can't be friends with him. Danuske has no idea why she suddenly started acting so strange, but that aside, this has been a good month for him since the demon army has grown quite a bit. But whenever there's growth, there's also increased risk, so everyone needs to keep their guard up. A couple of days pass and Danuske is working in his office as usual when Lulu comes in and tells him she has reached an agreement with the bear tribe like he asked her to. So as long as he meets their conditions, they will support the demon army. Danuske is glad to hear that things went well with the bear tribe, but there's something else Olulu wants to tell him. She heard that Danuske is going to be rewarded for all the hard work he has been putting in, and the award ceremony is going to be held soon. So she'll tell him about it after his lunch break is over. Danuske has no idea what he's going to be awarded, but with how the Demon Lord treats him, he can be sure that it will be better than a pizza party. Just then, Olmundra comes into Danuske's office with some lunch for them to share as they always do. But while Danuske loves eating with Olmundra, he hates the fact that the only food available in the demon army is bland porridge. He understands that there are limitations to the logistics of feeding an entire army, but he still wishes he could at least have some meat to go with the porridge. Olmundra hears Danuske complaining and she has the perfect solution, so if Danuske wants meat, then they are going to go get it from the source. Danuske really doesn't like the idea of going hunting just so he can eat some meat, but that's not the only reason Olmundra brought him out here. She actually received a request from the demi-human tribes living nearby, asking her to exterminate a magical beast that has been attacking them in this forest. So far, 5 orcs have been killed by this thing, and Danuske thinks that's terrible, but Olmundra sees it differently. It's perfectly natural for the weak to be eaten by the strong, and normally it would be the orc tribe's job to defend themselves from any threats like this. But the beast in question is far too strong for them to defeat, and Olmundra can't let the orc tribe be slaughtered, so she agreed to handle it for them. Speaking of which, Olmundra notices some mushrooms growing under a tree, and from what she was told, all the orcs who got eaten were attacked while picking these mushrooms, since they are a valuable ingredient. Therefore, the magical beast must be camping somewhere around here, and if they wait long enough, then it's sure to attack. Evidently, they didn't have to wait long since the boar shows up behind them almost immediately, so Olmundra tells Danuske to run for cover while she handles this. She jumps into the air and heel kicks the boar's face into the ground. But in retaliation, the boar starts using its horns to throw rocks at Olmundra, and although she can easily dodge them, Danuske can't, so he's freaking out. The boar starts smashing through trees and is heading straight for Danuske, but before he could get hurt, Olmundra lands a clean punch to the boar's stomach. From what he can see, it's clear to Danuske that Olmundra is strong, but so far, none of her strikes have been fatal. It wouldn't matter if this was just a regular fight, but right now their goal is to hunt this thing, so what she's lacking is killing power. The boar has sharp tusks to attack with, so a single mistake on Olmundra's end would be fatal. However, her blows only cause blunt force trauma, so she's going to end this quickly. Then Danuske thinks she needs a weapon. He was right about Olmundra's blows not being strong enough to kill this thing as she is now, but she has been holding back so far. She doesn't like using her true power because it takes a long time to recover from the effects, but she won't be able to kill this thing otherwise. The boar tries charging at her again, but this time Olmundra is able to stop it with one hand. She could easily kill it with a single punch right now, but that might ruin its meat, so instead, she picks it up and snaps its neck. Now that the boar is dead, Olmundra tells Danuske they can eat meat now, but honestly, Danuske's lost his appetite. They drag the boar's body to the orc village, so they can show the villagers that the boar has been dealt with, and all the villagers are really grateful for what Olmundra did, as well as impressed that she was able to take it down on her own. Olmundra is really enjoying all this praise, but that aside, it's rare to get so much meat, so Olmundra invites the entire village to share the boar with her. The villagers are all excited, but Danuske can't believe they are actually okay with eating boar meat when that thing was one evolution cycle away from being their next-door neighbor. However, he's even more surprised when he hears Olmundra say she's going to cook the meat. He asks her if she's really serious about cooking, so Olmundra offers to give him a taste of her homemade delicacy. Danuske is actually getting excited since Olmundra is making it sound so good, but when he asks her how she plans to cook, she just chucks a fireball at it. The result is this lump of charred flesh, and you can tell by the look on Danuske's face that this shit is straight trash. Olmundra tells him to just give it a try because it's better than it looks, but Danuske takes a bite and it tastes just as bad as it looks. This shit tastes like someone poured hot tar in his mouth, and he'd honestly rather starve than have to suffer through another bite of this. Olmundra tells him it's rude to insult someone's cooking like that, but Danuske tells her it's rude to call what she just did cooking. He has been enduring the culture shock of living in a new world so far, but this is too much for him to handle, so he asks if everyone can let him handle the cooking from now on. Once Danuske is done cooking the meat, Olmundra takes one bite and realizes this actually tastes amazing, so she asks Danuske what he did. He explains that first he soaked the pork in water to get all the blood out, and then he slow roasted it over a fire to remove all the excess fat in there. And finally, adding it to a soup helps get rid of any bad smells. He offers to teach the villagers if they want to learn, and the villagers are glad that one of the demon generals is being so thoughtful, but Olmundra doesn't think it's necessary for someone as high-ranking as Danuske to spend time teaching villagers how to cook. Danuske tells her she's wrong because his job is to improve the demon army, and a big step in the development of any civilization is their culinary advancement. It's natural for people who eat meat often to figure out different ways to improve the taste, but because meat is so rare here, no one can afford to experiment with it. In other words, this country is poor and lacking in knowledge. It sounds harsh when he puts it that way, but Olmundra can't argue since he's correct. This country is mostly barren, and compared to the surrounding nations, is pretty weak, but that's exactly why they have to work hard to make a change as part of the Big Four. Since they are done here, Olmundra suggests that they should return to the castle, but Danuske doesn't think that's a good idea since it's already dark out. However, Olmundra tells him it won't be a problem since she can illuminate their path with this fireball. She is really proud of her magic prowess since it's an ability unique to demons, and Danuske is quite impressed. It also makes sense why demi-humans who can't use magic train day in and out to become effective fighters, while demons like Olmundra can rely solely on their magic, but he thinks Olmundra could stand to improve her combat techniques a little. For instance, even though her attack power rises dramatically when she uses her true power to transform her body, it takes a while for her body to recover afterwards, so he suggests that she should bring a weapon with her to help with combat next time. He also suggests that she should wear armor that covers more of her body, but after he says this, Olmandra stops dead in her tracks and puts out her light. She understands that Denouske may be right, but his focus on efficiency is insulting to her, so she's way too mad to be around him right now. She ditches Denouske in the forest, and Denouske is left wondering why she got so mad, but before that, he's almost guaranteed to get eaten if he stays out in this forest, so he runs back to the orc village for safety. The next morning, Denouske meets with the Demon Lord to give a report on the mission, and the demon congratulates him on his success. But he heard that Olmandra returned last night, while Denouske only arrived this morning while being escorted by the orcs, so he wants to know if something bad happened between him and Olmandra. Denouske breaks down and says he's not worthy of being one of the demon army's generals. The Demon Lord tells him to calm down and explain what happened, so Denouske tells him everything. The Demon Lord can tell that Denouske inadvertently offended Olmandra, but what's important now is that they make amends for the sake of the demon army, so he officially orders Denouske to find a way to make up with Olmandra. But that's easier said than done. He recalls how proud Olmandra was when she said that demons are the only ones who can use magic, but there has to be more to it than that, so he starts reading a demon history book to see if he can figure something out. He soon finds a chapter talking about how a toned physique is essential for a demon's magic power, which is why demons take great pride in their bodies and often wear extremely revealing clothes. Denouske now understands why Olmandra got so upset, because when he told her that it would be more efficient to wear armor that covers her body more, he was basically rejecting her pride as a demon. But even if he knows the reason she got mad, he has no idea how he's going to repair their relationship. Meanwhile, over in the castle, Olulu has just finished chopping up the firewood for the day, and she's about to go handle her next task, but she is shocked to see a menacing wall of death in front of her. Olmandra is really upset about what happened with Denouske, so when she sees Olulu, she runs to her, crying that Denouske hates her and refuses to praise her body. Olulu has no idea what's going on at first, but after Olmandra explains what happened, she realizes where the misunderstanding might have come from. She tells Olmandra that as a human, Denouska's values are a lot different from theirs. In particular, Olulu knows that Denouske doesn't think exposing your body is a good thing, but Olmandra can't believe it since she's been exposing her body to him for weeks, and he never complained about it. Olulu explains that Denouske probably just thought Olmandra was some kind of exhibitionist, so he never questioned it. Upon hearing this, Olmandra suddenly realizes that if Denouske was uncomfortable with her exposed body, then all those gestures of bodily affection she had shown him probably did come off as some sort of deviant behavior. She's so embarrassed and angry at herself for ditching Denouske in the forest that she starts smashing her face into the floor, but Olulu begs her to stop because the floor can't take much more of this. Olmandra asks Olulu for advice on what she should do now since she got mad at Denouske for no reason, so Olulu tells her about a discussion she had with him when she first became his assistant. He told Olulu that he wanted her to stay true to her desires no matter what because he wanted her to feel free to talk about any troubles she had so they could come to a solution together. Regardless of any misunderstandings, Olulu is sure Olmandra can make up with Denouske as long as they talk it out. Denouske and Olmandra eventually find each other in the castle stairwell, and they've both got something really important to say, so Olmandra tells Denouske that she's not a hoe, she just wanted him to compliment her body, while at the same time, Denouske tells her that he thinks her body is hot. They both take a moment to process what the other said, and since it seems like they are both on the same page, Denouske apologizes to Olmandra. He didn't know much about demons and hadn't realized that what he said would be insulting to her. Olmandra accepts his apology and also apologizes to Denouske because it wasn't his fault that he didn't know about demon culture. And even if she was mad, she shouldn't have left him in the middle of the forest alone. Denouske did nearly die because of that, so Olmandra is really guilty. But since he ended up being okay, Denouske says he forgives her. He's glad they were able to make up, and now that they've gotten the chance to learn a little about one another, Denouske thinks they can become great partners. Although he still doesn't realize that Olmandra interprets the word partner as a marriage proposal. Later on, the Demon Lord gathers all his subordinates because he has a special announcement to make. After forming alliances with the various tribes, his demon army has grown far stronger than it used to be, and this is all thanks to the diligent work of his newest general Denouske, so in light of his achievements, the Demon Lord is presenting him with this magic stone. Denouske feels greatly honored to receive such a valuable stone, but he cannot accept it because he didn't do the work alone. None of this would have been possible if he didn't have Olmandra by his side, so he walks up to her, gets down on one knee, and asks Olmandra to accept the stone with him. Olmandra is happy, but she freaks out that Denouske is doing this in public with so many people watching. He's not aware of this, but presenting a magic stone to a girl is quite literally the definition of a marriage proposal in this world. So he just proposed to her in front of all the demon army leaders, and the only reason she didn't immediately accept is because she's embarrassed with everyone around. A couple of days later, Denouske is called into a meeting with the demon lord, and he's terrified because he thinks he did something wrong. So as a preemptive measure, he begins apologizing and begs to keep his job. The demon lord is surprised by Denouske's reaction and tells him he isn't in any kind of trouble. They literally held an award ceremony for him the other day because of how good he is at his job. With that said, the demon lord has something he wants to discuss with him. He asks Denouske what he thinks of the current relationship between the demi-humans and the demons of the demon army. From what Denouske has seen firsthand, it looks like the demi-humans feel inferior to the demons since only demons are capable of using magic. And that's exactly what the demon lord has been trying to address, so he asks Denouske to find a way to make it so everyone can use magic, because that way the demi-humans will be able to stand next to the demons as equals. Denouske thinks it's a good plan, but there's one major problem with it since Denouske can't use magic in the first place, so how's he supposed to figure out a way to allow everyone use it? The demon lord realizes that it's a daunting task, but that's why he gifted Denouske a magic stone, and he gives Denouske full authority to decide how he will use it to accomplish his mission. However, he won't be able to do it on his own, so the demon lord assigned a magic specialist to help. The specialist is Sylphid, and the demon lord assures Denouske Sylphid is really good when it comes to magic, but Denouske still needs to be a bit careful, because Sylphid is a major pain in the ass to deal with. Denouske says he understands and leaves the demon lord's throne room to go find Sylphid, and as he does this, Olmandra is watching him from behind the railing. She's been spying on Denouske any chance she gets for the past few days, partially because she's interested in finding out how his work is going, but also because she's still giddy with excitement from Denouske's marriage proposal a few days ago. Denouske soon arrives at Sylphid's room, so he knocks at the door, but the person who answers is Belinda, and she tells him that Sylphid isn't here right now, so he's going to have to come back later. She then tries to close the door on him, but Denouske sticks his foot in the door and insists on coming in anyway. Olmandra saw all this happen, and she's starting to get upset that Denouske would flirt with another woman after he already proposed to her. Meanwhile, inside Sylphid's room, Belinda tries convincing Denouske to leave since Sylphid isn't here. But he's not buying that story since he knows Belinda is really Sylphid. Belinda tries to deny it, but Denouske has two good reasons to believe that she's lying. First, he has memorized the list of all demon army officials, and there's no one named Belinda on payroll. And secondly, the demon lord already snitched on her and told Denouske that she likes to disguise herself to get out of work. Sylphid has clearly been caught, so she admits that Denouske is right about her, but he still doesn't understand why she would pretend to be her own assistant. Sylphid simply explains that if everyone knew her real identity, then they'd start giving her tons of work to do, and she hates work. Be that as it may, Denouske has some work he needs to discuss with her, so he asks Sylphid if she can spare some time to talk about magic tools with him. However, Sylphid flat out refuses to do anything that requires effort, even if it's under direct orders from the demon lord. Besides, she already made something like that in the past, so she has no reason to recreate it now. Denouske has no idea that Sylphid had tried making magic tools in the past, and since he seems pretty interested, she decides to let him see her invention. She pulls out an object and informs Denouske that it is made of a mineral base that allows magic to move through it easily, with pieces of magic stone layered on top of it. With this setup, it can be used to cast all types of magic, and that sounds exactly like what Denouske is looking for, so he asks Sylphid if he can have permission to mass produce it. Sylphid tells him he's free to do what he wants, but this prototype costs 50 million to make, so he's going to need one hell of a financial scheme to fund mass production. After all, the device requires high-level magic stones to be used in its construction, so of course it would be costly to make. Denouske is still shocked after learning how expensive these things are, and he now understands why Sylphid never put these into production, but he simply can't let himself give up yet, so he asks her if it would be possible to reduce the number of spells the device can cast. From what Sylphid told him, the device requires high-level magic stones to allow it to cast several different types of magic, so he suggests limiting it to a single spell. Sylphid is intrigued because she had never thought of it that way, and after a little thinking, she confirms that limiting the device to one spell would significantly reduce the cost since low-level magic stones could be used in production instead. She's really impressed that Denouske was able to come up with that idea in such a short amount of time, and it just so happens that he has a magic stone on hand, so he asks Sylphid if this will work. Sylphid is starting to get invested in this idea, and since they already have all the necessary materials, she's ready to begin work right away. But she needs an assistant to help, so she drags Denouske down into her basement and she doesn't plan on letting him sleep at all tonight. Meanwhile, outside Sylphid's room, Olmundra is starting to get suspicious and wonders what Dinuske could be doing in Sylphid's office with a woman so late at night. The next morning, we see Dinuske sitting on the basement floor, barely conscious due to a lack of sleep. Sylphid is equally sleep-deprived, but she's also really excited because she managed to completely redesign her magic tool to cast a single spell. Now this thing can be mass-produced for a fraction of the cost of the old model, and it's all thanks to her genius. However, before they can begin mass production, they still need to test it, so she tells Dinuske that he's going to be the test subject. Dinuske pleads with her to at least give him some time to rest since he's on the verge of collapse, so Sylphid allows him to leave, but she says she's only giving him a 1-hour break before he comes back so they can start testing this thing. As Dinuske heads back to the front door, he's about to open it, but before he could do anything, Olmundra barges in and demands to know what Dinuske has been doing all night. Olmundra's actions led to Dinuske getting knocked out, so she gets on her knees and tries to shake him until he wakes up, but all the shaking is just making him dizzy. Just then, Sylphid comes out of the basement, and she's wearing her usual outfit, so Olmundra won't realize that she was the woman from before. Olmundra is starting to question if what she saw earlier was right, but all of a sudden, Olmundra's assistant Lilim and Olulu enter the room as well because there's a huge emergency. A flock of Asiata birds has just attacked a few villages, and if nothing is done soon, then those villages will be destroyed. Asiata birds are large flightless birds that are known for their vicious nature, and they are so much of a threat that the Demon Lord has ordered that they do whatever it takes to drive those birds away. That's why Lilim came looking for Olmundra, since she's the only person capable of dealing with such a large flock. As she's being dragged away, Olmundra expresses her disappointment since she wants to spend time with Dinuske, but Sylphid sees this as the perfect opportunity to test out the new magic device, so she intends to bring Dinuske out to the battlefield. Once they are outside, Dinuske tells the locals to stand back a bit since what they are about to do might be dangerous. Sylphid sets the magic stone to cast a simple fire magic spell and hands it over to Dinuske so he can give it a try. Before that, Dinuske asks her if this thing has any safety features, but Sylphid assures him that even if it explodes, Dinuske will only lose an arm. But that doesn't make him feel any better. He decides to test it out anyway despite the risks, so as the flock of Asiata birds approaches, Sylphid instructs him to start channeling power from the device. It makes a strange sound when Dinuske powers it up, but Sylphid tells him that's just how it operates. Now she wants Dinuske to imagine that the device is an extension of his own body and let the energy flow until it accumulates in his right hand. Dinuske follows her instructions, and before long he has formed a fireball in his hand. Dinuske is amazed that he was actually able to use magic, and since the first phase was a success, Sylphid tells him to begin attacking the birds. Dinuske isn't sure if this will work, but he throws a fireball at one of the birds anyway, and it obliterates it. Slyphid encourages him to keep going until he has taken care of all the birds, so Dinuske continuously chucks fireball after fireball, and for the first time since he came to this world, he feels like he's really strong enough to win a fight. However, that feeling of power is short-lived because in the next moment, the magic device burns out, so he can no longer use magic. One of the birds closes in on Dinuske and is about to kill him, but before that could happen, Sylphid raises a barrier around him. Dinuske tries using the device again, but this time, it just seems to be slowly attracting the birds instead of allowing Dinuske to use magic. Slyphid takes care of the birds that were coming after Dinuske, and then she asks him why he isn't using the device to cast magic anymore, so he shows her the crystal, and it's clearly been overloaded. It looks like low-level magic crystal aren't enough to maintain the device after all, so this experiment is a failure. For now, they did manage to drive the birds away, so the villagers celebrate by making a pot of stew with the bird meat. While Dinuske is getting a bowl of stew, Sylphid is over by the tree, playing with one of the demi-human children. Dinuske comes over and expresses his surprise because he was under the impression that all demi-humans were strong, but he had no idea that some of them were this weak. Sylphid agrees with him, but even though they are weak, demi-humans like them are still very kind, and it reminds her a bit of her past. Sylphid was born into a merchant family of elves, but things went wrong and she ended up getting kicked out. She then lived as a wanderer for a while until she was welcomed into a village of demi-humans. The demi-humans were extremely kind to her, but none of them could use magic, and because of that, they lived in poverty. Sylphid wanted to help them, so she set out to invent a device that would allow them to use magic, but along the way, she got distracted and forgot her original reason for all of this. She turns to Dinuske and tells him that her goal as a researcher is to help people, so they need to make this project a success no matter what, especially since more of those birds are bound to attack this village again. Dinuske thinks about it for a minute, and he comes up with a great idea, so he asks Sylphid if she can make more of those magic devices by tomorrow morning. Since she already created the designs, it shouldn't take long to make more, but she won't be able to make any improvements to the design without her tools. Denouske tells her she doesn't need to make any improvements since what he's trying to do will work with the current design. The next morning, Denouske and Sylphid head out to confront the flock of birds charging towards the village, and before the birds could make it all the way here, Denouske activates the magic devices that he had stuck in the ground ahead of time. The sound from all the devices powering on at the same time is so disturbing to the birds that they all change their minds about attacking the village and run away. And best of all, since no actual spells were ever cast, the magic stones in the device will last for a very long time, meaning they can keep the remote villages safe while also saving on costs. The Demon Lord is greatly pleased with the innovation the two of them achieved, so he commends them both and asks Sylphid to begin mass production of the magic devices so they can be distributed to all the villages that need them. A little while later, Denouske meets up with Sylphid to thank her for all her help because he never could have achieved this result on his own. Similarly, Sylphid thanks Denouske for his help because he got her excited about her research again and reminded her that she's doing this to help people. She is truly grateful, so she tells him that if he ever needs help with something, he can come ask her. And before she leaves, she gives him a magic device she made especially for him. The other ones could only handle 10 spells at max, but this one can handle at least 30, so it should help him if he ever finds himself in danger. Denouske then returns to his office and he is more motivated than ever to get his paperwork done, but before he could even start, he gets knocked out when Olmundra comes barging in. She just heard about the whole research assignment with Sylphid, and she wanted to apologize to him for thinking he was flirting with another woman even though he proposed to her. But then she sees him unconscious on the floor, so she rushes to his side to see if he's okay. Later on, Denouske invites Olmundra out on a shopping trip, and Olmundra was so nervous about it that she went to Olulu to ask for some advice. Being asked to go shopping with him could mean only one thing, so Olmundra is certain that Denouske asked her out on a date. And since that is the case, she plans to pull out the big guns to impress Denouske. Olmundra intends to wear nothing but this bikini to showcase as much of her body as possible, but Olulu tells her that might not be such a good idea. Denouske would be uncomfortable with that much exposure, so it might be a better idea to go with something a little more conservative. Olmundra followed Olulu's advice, and thankfully, Denouske seems to really like her outfit, so she thinks this date might go well and her relationship with Denouske might go to the next level. Unfortunately, this is Denouske we're talking about, so the only reason he called Olmundra out to go shopping was because he wanted to research the market. And Olmundra is seriously bummed when she realizes this isn't a date after all. She's practically burning with anger, but she still wants to help Denouske out, so she asks him what kind of research he is conducting. Denouske explains it's always a good idea to get the opinions of the locals because it might give him a different perspective and help him improve the demon army. Although for now, he says he just wants to enjoy the scenery with Olmundra, which catches her off guard, but this is still not a date though. As they approach one stall, the stall owner happens to recognize Denouske as one of the elite demon army generals. Denouske is surprised that people know who he is, but there have been rumors going around about a human that the Demon Lord personally summoned, and Denouske's suit makes him stand out quite a bit. The man also recognizes Olmundra, and since she and Denouske are out here together, he assumes they are on a date, but Olmundra denies it because Denouske already made it clear that this trip is work-related. She explains that they are here to conduct market research, and since that's the case, the man offers to show them some of his finest goods, a set of pure gold ornaments, and since it's not every day he gets patronized by army generals, he even offers to give them a discount if they purchase these 2 cups as a pair. The man begins explaining that these cups are usually bought for couples that are getting married, but without giving it a second thought, Denouske says he wants to buy this for himself and Olmundra, which gives Olmundra mixed signals since this looks like Denouske is trying to flirt with her. But in reality, he just bought the cups so he could get some information from the shopkeeper, so Olmundra is once again disappointed. After a little more investigation, Denouske sits down with Olmundra to have some coffee while he goes over the results of their research. According to his findings, the recent alliances formed with the other demi-human territories have been well received by the people, so the different cultures are integrating nicely. However, this has also led to some negative side effects. Specifically, the increase in population has caused an unprecedented food shortage, and the price of staple crops like jim are too high for people to afford. Olmundra noticed the rising prices too. She went to one of the food retailers and demanded to know why they were making jim so expensive. But even while being violently shaken, the retailer told her that he can't afford to lower his prices, otherwise he would go into debt. The price of jim is definitely being inflated, but if the retailers aren't the ones doing the price gouging, then it must be the work of the wholesalers. Wholesalers are the ones in charge of distributing goods after bulk purchases from farmers. Usually, this arrangement would work fine, but there's the chance that the wholesaler might be artificially raising the prices of the gym to maximize profits, and since the retailers are forced to buy at the inflated price, they too must increase their prices in order to stay in business. Since the wholesalers are likely responsible for this, Olmandra thinks they should march into their building and demand that the prices be made normal. However, Danuske doesn't think that's a good idea, since what he said about the wholesalers being responsible is still pure speculation right now, and they can't risk making the wholesalers angry because it could cause a national disaster if they aren't careful. While sales are managed by a large commercial guild, and they command a fair bit of power, so before they act they need to gather more information regarding the matter. With that said, Danuske says they are done with their market research for the day, but there's still a lot of time before they have to return to the castle, so Danuske asks Olmandra if there's anything she wants to try in the meantime. Olmandra is excited since this might be her chance to have a proper date with Danuske, but then all hope of alone time with him goes out the window because Gnome shows up. Danuske is surprised to see her here and asks if Gnome came out to do some shopping as well, so she explains that today is an important day for her people, so she is here to buy gifts for the people she cares about. In this case, she is buying gifts for her comrades from the demon army, but she's still got beef with Olmandra, so Olmandra won't be getting anything from her. Just then, Gnome is approached by two rat demi-humans, and they plead with her to help save their store from bankruptcy. These two seem pretty desperate, so Danuske and the others decide to follow them back to their store and ask what the problem is. The rat couple explain that they have run this store for years and sold a food called chumozu, but year after year their sales have been declining, so they have been struggling to stay in business for a while. However, recently, they were approached by a big merchant named Buddha Galleon, and he placed a large order with them, claiming he could make a nice profit reselling the chumozu since gym is so expensive nowadays. The couple was delighted to hear such good news, so they worked tirelessly through the night, using every last ingredient they had to fill Buddha Galleon's order. Unfortunately, this morning, when he was supposed to pick up the order, he suddenly backed out of the deal and said he wasn't interested anymore, so the couple is now stuck with a massive amount of unsold product, and if they don't do something soon, they'll go bankrupt from all the money they wasted. The problem is definitely serious, but Gnome can't think of any way to solve it, so she turns to Danuske because she had heard that he is a good problem solver. She asks him if he has any ideas on how they can help the couple save their store, and thankfully, with the information he gathered from the market today, Danuske says he has the perfect solution. Gnome asks if he is really sure he can handle this, so Danuske assures her that his plan will work, meaning she can leave the rest to him. The first step in Danuske's plan is for the couple to verbalize their goal, so he asks them to clarify what they want to achieve. Chumozu expires within 1 day, which means they have to sell all 300 servings that the couple prepared by the end of the day. Danuske tried some of the chumozu earlier, and it seems pretty similar to the mochi from Japan. However, it is missing one key aspect. Much like mochi, chumozu doesn't have a distinct flavor on its own, therefore it can be combined with all sorts of side dishes and spices to make it more exciting. Now, the only thing to do is decide what flavor they would like to add to the chumozu, so he asks the couple about their usual customer base. They answer saying that since chumozu is a traditional food, it isn't really popular among young people, but now it is even losing popularity among old people as well. And to be honest, the couple can understand why, since they too are getting sick of the bland flavor. Olmandra can't believe the rats chose to continue selling chumozu when even they don't like it anymore, but that's beside the point. They don't have much time before the chumozu goes bad, so Danuske suggests that they split up the workload. He and the couple will stay here and think of good flavors to pair with the chumozu, while he wants Olmandra to go to the stores he wrote down on this list and ask for their assistance with his plan. After gathering everything they need, Danuske heads out into the market with a drum set to draw the people's attention. He tells them that today is Ruya Day, so they are all welcome to join in on the festivities that he has prepared. The people in the crowd seem intrigued since it looks fun, but they have no idea what Ruya Day is supposed to be, so Danuske begins explaining. From what he learned, the holiday is based on an old legend involving a pretty girl and a man selling chumozu. One day, the two happened to meet in the market, and they instantly fell in love with one another. However, there was a powerful man who wanted to make the girl his bride, but since she clearly wasn't interested in the king's proposal, the king got jealous and forbade her from ever meeting with the man she loved again. However, the two of them still snuck out to meet one another, and under the starry night sky, they both ate chumozu and wished that they could live together without needing to sneak around. That's when their prayers were answered by the heavens, and the two of them were pulled up into the night sky to live happily ever after. This legend is the basis of the Ruya festival, and it is said that if you exchange chumozu with a loved one and eat it together with them, then your wish might come true. The crowd seems really intrigued by Danuske's story, so they want to buy some chumozu and try out the tradition. And it just so happens that Danusuke knows a couple who have a boatload of chumozu in stock. Most people know chumozu to be boring and tasteless, but after some brainstorming with Danusuke, the couple managed to change that and came up with these new and exciting variations. The people start buying a ton of chumozu, and even though Olmundra had full faith that Danusuke would find a way to pull it off, she is still surprised that he managed to convince all these young people to eat a snack that was meant for old-timers. Danusuke explains that when the popularity of a product is on a downward spiral, it can be restored by switching the target customer base. Earlier, when they were doing their market research, Danusuke realized that there were a large number of young people and their families in the market, so who better to target than them? With the new marketing strategy and flavors, Danusuke wouldn't be surprised if chumozu became the best-selling item in the market overnight. In fact, he's already thinking of plans to open chain stores and expand overseas to increase profits, but Olmundra snaps him out of his business frenzy. Later that night, a crowd has started dying down, so Danusuke and Olmundra go to meet the couple, and the couple can't thank them enough for their help because they managed to sell all their stock thanks to them. Danusuke tells them not to worry about it because their success wasn't because of him alone. It was also due to their own hard work, Olmundra's help, and Gnome as well. Gnome may have left at the start, but during the day, Danusuke had heard from a few of the demi-humans that Gnome had recommended this store to them, so she must have spread the word of the chumozu store to help them out. Still, to show their gratitude, the couple offers Danusuke and Olmundra a plate of chumozu to share, and Danusuke happily accepts it. Olmundra begins blushing because she remembers the part of a legend that says you share chumozu with someone you love, so for Danusuke to be so eager to share some with her can only mean one thing. She tries not to get her hopes too high, but then Danusuke pulls out the wedding cups he bought earlier and says he wants to give one of them to Olmundra. The evidence that he wants to marry her is overwhelming at this point, so Olmundra asks him what he plans to wish for while they share the chumozu, and without skipping a beat, Danusuke answers that he plans to wish for the success of his next project, so Olmundra is once again disappointed. Later that night, Danusuke goes to meet with the Demon Lord because he has something important to discuss with him. During his market research today, he managed to discover a lot of useful information, but most notably, he discovered this golden ornaments for sale. These ornaments originated from a nearby nation known as the Golden Country due to its abundant gold mines. So if the Demon Lord plans to expand the demon army, Danusuke suggests that they should establish trade ties with the Golden Country. The Demon Lord thinks this is a great idea, so he says they will begin trade negotiations as soon as possible, and he knows the perfect thing to trade. He pulls out one of the magic devices and says they will trade these with the Golden Country, but Danusuke doesn't think that is a good idea since the magic device is technology that only the demon army possesses, so they shouldn't sell it off so easily. However, the Demon Lord sees it differently. No matter what they do, the technology will eventually be stolen by outsiders or replicated, but something that can't be replicated is personnel. So as long as the Demon Lord has talented individuals like his 4 generals around, he is sure they will be able to create even greater magical devices in the future. He gives Danusuke permission to handle all negotiations on the matter, but he also warns him to be careful because the king of the Golden Country is a formidable man. The day soon comes for Danusuke to begin the negotiations, and he is getting ready to travel to the Golden Country to meet with the king. Before he sets out, Olmundra meets him by the carriage, and she suggests coming along since she's worried Danusuke might get into trouble. But this negotiation is meant to be his first solo mission, so he says he has to do it on his own. Olmundra understands that he wants to do this on his own, but she warns him that the king of the Rampage Country has a really short temper, so Danusuke needs to be careful about how he talks to him. For example, the king once fed a merchant to a crocodile because he kept trying to sell him a carriage extended warranty, and upon hearing this, Danusuke is starting to get worried as well. He still has to go though, so Danusuke's carriage sets out, and as he leaves, Olmundra shouts words of encouragement and reminds Danusuke to stay away from the Golden Country's women. After a long journey, Danusuke finally arrives in the Golden Country known as Rampage, and it is as lively as the rumors say. He's glad he chose to pursue negotiations with this country because until now, the demon army has only exported crops such as gem for foreign exchange. However, due to the sudden increase in population, not only is the demon army using up its entire gem supply, but has also had to rely on the importation of those crops as well. To fix this, Danusuke plans to trade for something valuable like gold, and what better place to acquire gold than from the Golden Country. Danusuke is easily able to secure an audience with the king thanks to his position as one of the demon army's elite generals, and after a few moments the king of Rampage enters his throne room. Danusuke lowers his head to greet the king and begins introducing himself, but the king already knows everything there is to know about him. He knows that he was summoned to this world a few months ago as one of the demon generals, and since then, he has both expanded the demon army's influence and implemented several reforms. By all accounts, the king believes Danuske is a talented person, but there's still one thing he doesn't understand. If he has been one of the demon army's generals for several months, then why is this the first time Danuske has come to greet the king? The king is clearly upset and Danuske doesn't know what to say, so he just starts apologizing, but with the way things are going, it looks like negotiations might break down before they even begin. The king then asks Danuske if there's reason he called for this meeting, so Danuske points to the cart behind him and says he has brought an offering for the king. He lays out a collection of the finest silverware the demon army has to offer, but this is the king of the Golden Country we're talking about, so he is gravely insulted that Danuske would dare to bring him silver as a gift. The king is in a foul mood now and Danuske apologizes, but this was actually all part of his plan. He then pulls out the magic device and says he will offer it to the king as an apology since he was unhappy with the silver. At first, the king isn't impressed by the device since it is clearly made from a low-level magic stone. But while that may be true, Danuske informs him that this magic device is capable of driving magical beasts away. It is an original invention of the demon army, so it is impossible to get it anywhere else, and Danuske happens to know that the Golden Country has a bit of a magical beast problem in their minds. The king doesn't deny it, so Danuske goes on to explain how he heard about the rock golems that terrorize the mines, interrupting the work of miners and forcing the king to hire a dedicated mine defense force. However, with these magic devices, he could completely eliminate the need for a defense force, while also ensuring the safety of the miners and increasing productivity. He then shows the king a small collection of rosmarines and tells him that these will be his offering for today, but if he thinks they would be useful, then he is welcome to purchase more from the demon army. The king finds Danuske's proposal intriguing, and he would definitely like to buy more, but only if Danuske can prove that what he said about the magical devices is really true. With a snap of his fingers, the lights go out and the king's pet crocodile is released right next to Danuske. If Danuske is telling the truth about the magic devices, then the king believes he should have no problem driving the croc away. This is a terrifying way to test someone, and Danuske is internally freaking out. But he is also confident in the performance of the magic devices, so he holds up one of the devices up and activates it to scare the crocodile away. The device works, but as the crocodile moves away from Danuske, it sees the king and decides to go after him instead. Danuske sees this and tries to use one of the devices to shoot a fireball at the crocodile, but it turns out that Danuske's help wasn't necessary because the king easily strikes the croc down and turns it to ash. He is impressed that the magic devices really do work, but he is also impressed with Danuske as a person. Even though Danuske is a commoner, he has the spirit to stand before the king as an equal. He is talented in negotiations and immediately prepared to act when he thought the king's life was in danger. The king has taken a liking to him, so he says he will buy the rosmarines from the demon army, and as payment, he places 3 gold bars before Danuske. With this amount, Danuske says the demon army can prepare 200 units within the next month, but the king is an impatient man, so he says he is only giving them 1 week to prepare the units. And as compensation for the shortened time frame, he brings out several tons of gold. Negotiations turned out to be successful, but creating 200 units in 1 week will be a tough order to fill. Danuske tries asking Sylphid if there's a way to make 200 in time, but she tells him straight up that it's impossible. They've only recently begun mass-producing the rosmarines, so to ask them to crank out that many in just a week is unreasonable. Danuske pleads with her to see if there's something she can do, but she can't just pull an extra 50 workers out of nowhere. Plus, local demand for the rosmarines has also been on the rise, so she says they are already overworked as it is now. She scolds Danuske for accepting such a large request without considering the on-site workload, and Danuske admits that he may have messed up. But then he thinks about the situation and remembers seeing the logistics report of the rosmarine distribution a few days ago. According to the report, priority had been given to the areas with magical beast issues, so overall rosmarine demand should be pretty low right now. Meaning Sylphid was lying to him about being understaffed so she could get out of doing more work. Sylphid realizes she's been caught, so she has no choice but to agree to fill the order, and she promises to make the 200 units by next week. However, just then, a messenger from the Golden Country runs in and tells them that the Golden King was so impressed by the rosmarines that he wants even more, so that 200 order is actually going to be 300 now. Anyway, through tons of hard work and overtime, the production team manages to create the 300 units within the 3-week time frame. And now that they've met their quota, Danuske can finally relax. Olulu congratulates him for managing to fulfill the order, but speaking of which, she has been wondering how much Danuske sold the rosmarines for. Danuske tells her got the Golden King to pay 50,000 bucks for each rosmarine, so for the 300 units he ordered, it comes out to 150 million. Olulu can't believe Danuske actually managed to convince the Golden King to pay that much, but it was all thanks to his carefully thought-out psychological attack. Since the devices are still unknown, they can set the price to whatever they want. So to establish the Rosmarin's value, Danuske first brought out some expensive goods as gifts for the king. He intentionally chose silverware so the Golden King would be angered, but even if he rejected the silverware, he would still acknowledge that they are objectively valuable goods. That way, when Danuske brought out the Rosmarin, it would automatically seem like it was incredibly valuable. Olulu had no idea Danuske could do such a thing, but she is really impressed. She asks him if he planned to receive so many orders as well, but that part was actually a surprise to him. He's just glad they managed to get the orders taken care of in time. However, at that very moment, the Golden Country messenger comes back and says the Golden King wants to order an extra 100 units. Danuske immediately starts having visions of how angry Sylphid is going to be when they tell her about the extra order, so he heads downstairs and prepares to beg for her cooperation so they can get it done. Sylphid isn't happy about it, but she agrees to do what she can to fill the additional orders, so she hires more workers and teaches them how to make the Rosmarins. With the new workers on the job, they are making steady progress towards completion of the final 100 sets, so all that's left is to deliver it all. With continuous use, the Rosmarin should last about a month, meaning the Golden King will have to keep buying from the demon army indefinitely. So this mission has been a resounding success for Danuske. However, just as he was starting to relax, Olulu comes running into his office and tells him the Golden King just canceled the entire order. Danuske begs Olulu to say she's joking, but it's the truth. The Golden King canceled all the remaining orders after receiving the first 100. This is a huge problem for them since they haven't gotten their gold payment yet, and they already blew a huge portion of the demon army's budget on the raw materials for the Rosmarins. Because of this, budget cuts had to be implemented, so the demi-human forces didn't get a new weapons shipment, and the merchants are left wondering if they should do business in another country. Danuske is left wondering where he could have gone wrong with this deal and worries that he may have offended the Golden King somehow. But he's also wondering how there could be a Rosmarin replica circulating in the market already. However, regardless of the reason, the demon army's funds have been drained because of his actions and morale is plummeting, so he feels like he needs to take responsibility. He goes to meet with the Demon King and tells him that this whole mess is his fault. The Demon King asks Danuske why he thinks he is to blame for the current situation. So Danuske explains that he was already aware of how self-centered and impatient the Golden King was, but he was so happy with the successful negotiations that he failed to consider the risks involved. He says he is willing to accept whatever punishment the Demon King has for him, but the Demon King has no intention of punishing him. One cannot be expected to succeed indefinitely, and no matter how well you plan, sometimes shit just happens, so he doesn't blame Danuske for the situation. What's important is that Danuske learns from this and uses it to improve himself in the future. Danuske takes the Demon King's encouragement to heart, so he leaves the throne room, and the first thing he wants to do is formally apologize to the people who were affected by this mishap. First on the list are the troops under Gnome who got their budget cut, but he runs into Gnome at the bottom of the staircase and she doesn't seem mad at him at all. Next, he goes to Sylphid's room and tries to apologize to her as well, but she cuts him off and says she's just glad she can take a break now that she doesn't have to fill those orders anymore. Danuske is glad she's not mad at him, so he leaves and starts thinking about any more people he might need to apologize to. However, all of a sudden, he gets stuffed in his sack and is dragged away. He thinks this must have been done by someone who wants revenge for all the trouble he caused, so as soon as he manages to free himself from the sack, he begins apologizing again. However, the one who kidnapped him turns out to be Olmundra, and she's not trying to get revenge, but just wanted to enjoy some meat with him. The two sit down together, and Danuske asks her if she's trying to cheer him up, and Olmundra gets all flustered, but she admits that that's exactly what she's trying to do. Danuske thanks her for being so considerate, and Olmundra realizes this might be the perfect time to score some relationship time with Danuske, so she starts scooting closer to him. But all of a sudden, Olulu shows up behind the two of them, so Olmundra pulls away. Olulu just wanted to offer the two of them some fruit, but upon getting closer, she realizes she may have interrupted a moment between them. Later on in the night, Olulu and Olmundra end up falling asleep. Danuske covers them so they don't catch a cold, and he is grateful to have coworkers like them. The people here didn't condemn him for his failure, and instead tried to cheer him up, so no matter what, Danuske is going to make sure the demon army can rebound. At the same time, we see the Golden King as he is making a deal for the cheaper Rosmarins. Since these are truly just as effective while costing only half the price, the Golden King didn't hesitate to switch suppliers, but he is curious as to how Budagalion managed to acquire the Rosmarins. However, Budagalion says that's a trade secret, all with a smile on his face that means he definitely did something illegal. Now that Danuske has come to terms with the situation, he starts trying to develop countermeasures, and the first step is to figure out how counterfeit Rosmarins flooded the market. The counterfeits were presumably created in less than a month, but none of it makes sense to Danuske since it would take ages for someone to reverse engineer the Rosmarines and figure out how to make one. The only plausible explanation is that someone sold the Rosmarines acquired from the Demon Army without permission. The Demon Army distributed Rosmarines all across the nation, but only to areas that suffer severe monster attacks, and the people there wouldn't risk their safety for a quick profit. All of a sudden, Olmandra bursts into Danuske's office and tells him that the Rosmarines that were distributed within the kingdom are reportedly ineffective, so now he has more than one problem to deal with. He and Olmandra head to one of the villages that reported the ineffective Rosmarines, and the place has been completely ransacked by magical beasts. Neither the village's chief nor Danuske understand how something like this could have happened, since the Rosmarines are meant to keep all magical beasts at bay. But when Danuske starts digging into the ground to see if there's something wrong with the Rosmarines they bury here, he discovers a major problem. It's not there. He and the others check all the other spots where the Rosmarines were hidden, and sure enough, every single one of the Rosmarines is missing from its spot. This revelation leads Danuske to believe that someone is stealing the Rosmarines, but he needs to confirm it before he can take any action. So he asks Olmandra to help him map out all the villages which have filed complaints about missing Rosmarines. After a little planning, Danuske takes Olmandra out late at night to do some investigation, but she doesn't understand why they came to this particular village, since no complaints have come from here. Just then, Danuske sees some movement in the field, so he tells Olmandra to stay quiet while they stay hidden behind this tree. They watch as two suspicious people run around and eventually pull one of the Rosmarine out on the ground. But just as the suspicious people were about to start leaving, they are confronted by Danuske and Olmandra. This is exactly what Danuske had suspected, and it explains why the counterfeits had the same quality but were sold at such a low price. Someone is hiring thieves to steal the original so they can be resold, and since all the goods are stolen, the mastermind behind all this can sell the Rosmarines for insanely low prices while still making a large profit. Danuske asks the thieves to tell him who their employer is, but the thieves don't plan on giving him any information, and one of them lunges at Danuske with its claws out. Luckily, Olmandra comes to Danuske's defense and knocks the thief out. The other one tries to attack her as well, but he gets knocked down as well, so the two thieves realize they stand no chance and start running away. Olmandra is about to chase after them so they don't get away, but Danuske tells her there's no need since the Rosmarines they just stole are bombs. Figuratively. The following day, Budigalion receives the stolen Rosmarines, and as planned, he presents them to the Golden King as requested. The Golden King is greatly pleased with Budigalion's work since he prepared a product just as good as the Demon Armies, and did so at half the price. He even managed to make dozens of Rosmarines in one night, which shouldn't be physically possible, but the Golden King isn't going to think about it too much. He praises Budigalion for being such an excellent merchant, and Budigalion accepts the praise because he prides himself on doing whatever it takes to make his customer happy. If it wasn't clear by now, Budigalion is a very wealthy merchant, but he's not an honest one. He earned all his money by buying things cheap and selling them at expensive prices, which normally wouldn't be that bad, but he's really shady about the way he conducts his business. When he first heard about the Rampage Kingdom forming a contract with the Demon Army, Budigalion immediately knew this would be a great opportunity to make a quick profit, so he got his hands on one of the Rosmarines and tried to have his craftsman reverse engineer it so he could create his own. But unfortunately, his craftsman told him it was too complex to recreate, so Budigalion naturally moved on to the next best option. He stole the Rosmarines directly from the Demon Army. Of course, what he did is very illegal and immoral too, but as long as Budigalion gets his gold, he doesn't care what he has to do. He leaves the Rampage Kingdom with his cart full of gold, and a few days later, he returns with more stolen Rosmarines to sell to the Golden King. But to his surprise, as he approaches the front gate, he is stopped by the guards. The guards tell him that the Golden King has issued an order for his arrest, so they grab Budigalion and bring him to the king's throne room. Budigalion doesn't understand what's going on and asks the king why he was forcefully brought here. So the king pulls out one of the Rosmarines that Budigalion sold to him on his previous visit and crushes it because it's a fake. All the Rosmarines Budigalion brought were fake, so he wants an explanation. Budigalion can't believe it and tries to assure the king that it is a misunderstanding because he would never try to pass off faulty goods to a man like him, but the king's patience is thinner than my hairline, so Budigalion isn't going to be able to talk his way out of this one. To make matters worse for him, there's someone else here who has something to say, so Danuske walks out from the shadows and introduces himself to Budigalion. Budigalion is even more nervous than he was before because he has heard the rumors about Danuske, the Demon Army general, and he is absolutely terrifying. It is said that he had the power to bend the Minotaurs and other powerful demi-humans to his will, and has achieved many other things in just a few months. Without a doubt, he's the most fearsome person in the demon army, so Budigalion is terrified by what Dinuske must have in store for him. Dinuske begins his statement by explaining that someone has been stealing the demon army's rosmarines recently, and he has reason to believe that Budigalion is the one behind it. That is why, to put a stop to the theft, Dinuske had this developed. A perfect replica of the rosmarine. At first glance, it is identical to a real one, but it doesn't actually do anything though. Its design is so good that even the king couldn't tell that it was a fake, and Dinuske has Sylphid to thank for the flawless design. After he realized that someone was stealing the rosmarines, he went to her to ask for help creating the rosmarine replicas. Sylphid initially refused since something like that would require a ton of work, but Dinuske seemed pretty desperate, so she said she would do it, but in exchange for her work, she wanted him to get her a cake. After Sylphid was done making the fake rosmarines, Dinuske used the map of village to figure out which village the thieves would likely target next, and went there ahead of time to set trap. Sure enough, thieves showed up and stole the fake rosmarines, but with that said, it's strange that Budigalion is in possession of those same fake rosmarines. Budigalion realizes he's majorly screwed because all this was part of Dinuske's plan to expose him, and he's doing it in front of the Golden King too, so there's no chance of Budigalion escaping. No matter how he looks at it, his odds of survival aren't looking good, so Budigalion uses his last resort and starts begging for his life. He apologizes to the king for his action, but he says he was only stealing the rosmarine so he could give the king the best deal possible, so he didn't know it was wrong. He's aware of how dumb that argument sounds, but it doesn't matter as long as it gets the king to spare his life. But unfortunately for Budigalion, mercy isn't one of the king's strong suits, so he declares that he is sentencing Budigalion to death. He uses his powers to create a lightning cage around Budigalion and then drops one of his gators from the ceiling for a midday snack. Budigalion screams in terror as he sees the hungry gator approaching him, and as he is slowly being attacked by it, he tries to flee, but there's nowhere to go. Hopelessness starts to set in as Budigalion comes to terms with the fact that he will die here. His final thought before he dies is of his children, and how he won't be able to take care of them anymore once he's gone. However, as the gator is about to chomp down on him, Dinuske uses his personal magic device to shoot a fireball at the gator. The king is enraged that Dinuske would dare to interfere with his execution. Dinuske was involved in the situation, so the king graciously allowed him to be present and make his case against Budigalion, but that doesn't give him the right to interfere with state affairs. He asks Dinuske if he is willing to take responsibility for his actions, but Dinuske says he has a good reason for what he did, so he asks the king to hear him out. The king is even more enraged and unleashes his twin lightning dragons, but he is willing to listen to what Dinuske has to say, so he lets him speak. First of all, Dinuske makes it clear that he is not doing this because he cares about Budigalion. He is doing it solely for the benefit of the Golden King. He claims that if Budigalion is killed, then it will lead to the collapse of the Rampage Kingdom, but the king fails to see how a single dishonest merchant could be so important. However, when Dinuske mentions the orange powder, it gets the king's attention. The Rampage Kingdom was formed thanks to its gold mines and has continued to thrive ever since, but in recent years the amount of gold has diminished, which is why it is important to extract as much gold as possible from minerals. And to do this, orange powder is used. By applying magic to the powder, it is possible to extract nothing but gold from the dirt. And the person in charge of importing the orange powder is Budigalion, so Dinuske tells the king that he can't kill him. The king still doesn't see why Budigalion is so important, since he can just have another merchant handle the orange powder import, but Dinuske tells him that it won't work. The orange powder is obtained from the country of Toki, and due to many civil wars over it, Toki is now restricting the export of orange powder altogether, so it would be impossible for a new merchant to get his hands on some. However, Budigalion is a special exception to the rule. Budigalion wonders how Dinuske could possibly know all this, so he explains that he was looking into orange powder a while ago to see if he could get some and use it to manufacture gold for the demon army. But unfortunately, it's impossible for him. Anyway, back to Budigalion. During one of the civil wars in Toki, the people were running out of food and supplies because no countries were supporting them, and all the merchants had fled. But Budigalion continued to trade in Toki even though it had become an active war zone at the time, and because of that, Toki's economy managed to survive the war. That is why Toki, as well as several other countries, are indebted to Budigalion, so he has received special permission to trade certain restricted goods. Even if some of his methods might be shady, Dinuske thinks it would be a shame to kill a merchant as skilled as Budigalion. Dinuske's argument is quite compelling, so the king dispels his lightning dragons, but he still doesn't understand why Dinuske would go so far, since even if Budigalion were to be killed and the Rampage Kingdom collapses, it would have nothing to do with the demon army. Plus, Budigalion stole directly from the demon army, so his presence is a problem for them. However, Danosuke doesn't understand why the king is so confused, since it's natural to want to help someone if you see them in trouble. Both Budigalion and the king are shocked by how innocent Danosuke is, so much so that the king bursts out laughing and can hardly control himself. He's in a good mood now, so he decides to let Budigalion live and leaves to go take a nap. Danosuke and Budigalion are then kicked out of the throne room, but at least they are both alive. Budigalion is still wary of Danosuke, since no ordinary man could make the king laugh so hard, so he assumes this was all part of Danosuke's plan. But in reality, Danosuke was quaking in his boots the entire time, so his legs are practically jelly now, and he needs help walking. Budigalion helps him walk, and the two head for the exit, but as they are leaving, Olulu shows up along with all the thieves that were working for Budigalion. But it turns out that they aren't just thieves, they are Budigalion's children. The girls are glad to see that Budigalion is safe, since they were sure the king would hurt him once the truth came out, but while he's glad to see them, he doesn't understand why the girls are here. Olulu explains that Danosuke asked her to find the girls and bring them here to see Budigalion. After the Chimozu incident with Budigalion, Danosuke did a little research on him, and at first he looked like a crooked merchant, but then Danosuke found out about how he took in a bunch of war orphans and raised them as his own. Anyone who would do that can't be all bad, so Danosuke couldn't help but want to protect him. Budigalion can't believe Danosuke went so far for him and his children, so he's really grateful to him. Later, before Danosuke leaves, he offers Budigalion a contract to sell the Rosmarines on behalf of the demon army. Budigalion is in disbelief because why would Danosuke offer him such an important contract when he already ripped them off once before? But Danosuke says he trusts that Budigalion won't do anything like that again. Plus, the demon army is pretty busy, so they don't have time to market the Rosmarines to distant places, which is why he wants Budigalion to do it. Budigalion is touched that Danosuke is willing to trust him after what he did, so he swears that he will change his ways and make sure Danosuke never regrets doing business with him. Now that the deal has been finalized, Danosuke turns to leave, but before he does, Budigalion informs him of a rumor he heard. It looks like the guilds in the demon army territory are becoming active. Danosuke and Olmundra later meet with the demon lord, and he is here to assign a pressing issue to them. The price of food in the nation has been on the rise recently, and it's starting to get so bad that the average citizen can no longer afford to eat. He wants Danosuke to find a solution to this problem at once, and Danosuke is more than happy to take on the task. He begins thinking about the issue and realizes that the high cost of food must be due to the guild controlling the supply, but he doesn't understand why the guild would do such a thing. Olmundra thinks the guild is doing all of this out of greed, so she offers to handle it and knock some sense into the guild officials, but Danosuke thinks it'll take more than that to solve the problem. Just then, the demon lord tells Danosuke he is dismissed, so he can leave to start working on the food situation, but he has a separate assignment for Olmundra because he needs her to head up north. Danosuke still doesn't know what motive the guild could have for increasing prices to such an extent, but if he wants to find out, then he's going to have to schedule a meeting with the guild master. A few days later, it is time for Danosuke's meeting with the guild master, so he prepares to head out, but as he is leaving, he is stopped by Sylphid, and she looks a lot different than usual. He asks her why she's dressed like that, so Sylphid says she's going to accompany him to the guild, but while she's in this outfit, she wants him to refer to her as Belinda. A certain clan of elves currently holds officer positions within the guild, so she figured it would be easier for Danosuke if he had an elf with him during his discussions. Danosuke thanks her for her concern, but he doesn't think she needs to worry about him since he's going as a representative of the demon army, so there's no way the guild wouldn't take him seriously. Well, they arrive at the guild, and just as Belinda feared, they aren't being taken seriously because they end up being left to wait for 4 hours before the guild master actually comes outside to meet them. And when he finally does come out, the guild master, Viper, just says he forgot about them and shows no remorse whatsoever for making them wait. Danosuke is willing to overlook it, but Belinda isn't so forgiving, so she gets up in Viper's face, and now that he gets a good look at her, he recognizes her as his sister. He and Belinda are siblings, but they haven't seen each other in years since Belinda got exiled from her family years ago, and honestly, Belinda had hoped she would never have to see Viper's ugly face again, but since they are here, she tells him that Danosuke has business he wants to discuss. Danosuke is stunned to find out that Belinda is related to Viper, but that's a matter to discuss later. For now, he tells Viper that he wishes to purchase some grains from the guild because the current supply is too low. Viper feigns ignorance of the issue, but he says that if Danosuke wants him to sell more food to the demon army, then he's going to have to get down on his knees and beg for it. Now, most people with self-respect wouldn't even consider going through with it, but years as an underappreciated salaryman have erased all pride from Danosuke's body, so without hesitation, he falls to his knees and begs Viper to sell him the food. Viper is shocked that he actually did it, and he finds Denosuke amusing, so he apologizes for joking around too much and says he will sell him some food. However, he is selling it at 50,000 gold for one bag of gym, which is ludicrously unreasonable. But he tells them that if they don't want to pay his price, then they don't have to buy it. He then turns to leave, but before he does, he gives Denosuke a little friendly advice. He's way too careless with his pride because groveling like that in front of others will eventually turn him into a mockery. There's nothing more Denosuke or Belinda can do, so they leave the guild, but once they are outside, Belinda is still mad and suggests they should burn the whole place down along with Viper, but Denosuke thinks that might be going too far. Belinda doesn't understand how Denosuke can be so calm after he was humiliated in there for nothing, but for Denosuke, getting down on his knees isn't enough to hurt his pride, so he doesn't mind what happened. He's honestly still in shock that the guild master turned out to be Sylphid's younger brother. Sylphid decides to give him the full backstory and explains that she was born into an elven merchant family, but since elves have a hard time procreating, it is common for them to interbreed with other species. Sylphid herself is a cross between an elf and a fairy, while Viper is a cross between an elf and a lizard. As a result of this interbreeding, the children are often born with characteristics of their mixed species, so there are some who become obsessed with gathering wealth and fame, and that obsession led them to burn down the elf village and sell their own brethren into slavery for profit. Sylphid was so disgusted by their behavior that she left the Lord Penthouse, and since then she has had nothing to do with them. But now that she knows her scumbag brother is involved with the guild, there's no way she's going to let him go unchecked. Denosuke understands how she feels, but he wishes she would have at least given him a chance to talk to Viper before starting an argument with him. That aside, Sylphid asks him what he plans to do now, because there's no way they can afford the ludicrous price that Viper set. Denosuke starts trying to think of a good plan of action, but just then, he's approached by a little girl, and she begs him to save her from the Lord Pent family. The girl's name is Naya, and she tells Denosuke that she is being forced to work for the Lord Pent family, so she wants his help exposing the evil deeds they have committed. Denosuke takes a long, hard look at the girl, and then decides to help because she's cute, but before that, he wants to buy her some proper clothes. He takes Naya to a store and picks out a purple dress for her, and you can tell that he's having fun, but Sylphid is starting to get suspicious that Denosuke is into little girls. Moving on, Denosuke asks Naya if she is willing to act as a whistleblower against the Lord Pent family, and she confirms it, so Denosuke takes her to a restaurant so he can listen to her story. According to what Naya says, the Lord Pent separated her from her family and forced her to work for the guild master. There are any other people like her who are forced to work for very little pay, and is certainly bad, but Denosuke asks if she has any other information she can give him. Naya also tells him that there have been rumors spreading through town about a calamity approaching which will make it hard to buy food. However, all the rumors are being circulated by the guild to scare the people. This way, the guild can raise their prices and the people will still buy it. Additionally, the guild also bought a lot of the existing gym supply and are limiting access to so they can maximize profits. All this is pretty damning evidence, but most of the officers in the guild are from the Lord Pent family and everyone else has been bribed, so nothing has been done about it. The Merchant Guild that was originally created to serve the common good has now come under the control of the Lord Pent family to serve their greedy desires. Denosuke intends to crack down on them, but to do that, he is going to need concrete evidence. Sylphid thinks it would be a lot easier to catch Viper in a dark alleyway and give him the London streets treatment. And while that definitely would solve part of their problem, Denosuke wants to go about this fair and square. Viper controls people by using money as his weapon, so Denosuke plans to fight as well and use the demon army as his weapon. So with immediate effect, Denosuke returns to the guild with Sylphid and Naya to perform an emergency audit of the guild. Viper realizes that Denosuke is trying to back him into a corner here because he has no right to refuse the audit, and if Denosuke and the others manage to find either the supply of gem he has been hoarding or the transaction books, it would be enough to expose his monopoly. The reason Denosuke arrived so abruptly was because he couldn't risk giving Viper time to hide the evidence, but something seems off because Viper doesn't look like he's bothered by the surprise audit. He tells Denosuke to do whatever he wants, so Denosuke and the others head straight for the storage room. He remembers hearing from one of the villages nearby that they had sold a large amount of gem to the guild recently, so there's no way Viper could possibly move all of it in time. However, as Denosuke opens the door to the storage room, he is shocked to find it completely empty. He can't believe what he is seeing, and as if to rub salt in his wounds, Viper along with the rest of the guild officials show up behind him and start laughing because Denosuke's plan failed. Denosuke can see skid marks on the floor, so he knows the djinn was here at some point. In a last-ditch attempt to catch Viper, he asks him how it's possible that the guild has no gem at all in storage, but Viper simply explains it away, saying he found a buyer for it yesterday. It's obviously a lie, but good luck proving that in court. Ultimately, Danuske and Sylphid were forced to leave in defeat because they couldn't prove that Viper had done anything wrong. Even the guild ledgers had no inconsistencies, so it's practically impossible to prove that Viper is engaging in fraudulent activities. Faking ledger documents is a lot harder than moving products, so Sylphid thinks Viper might have been conducting his illegal trades under the name of the Lord Pent family, and that would explain why all the ledgers were so spotless. But right now, there's a more pressing matter at hand. It was clear that Viper had prepared for their audit in advance, but how could he have possibly known about it? It was supposed to be top secret, yet he still managed to learn of it and had enough time to hide the evidence. That must mean he received information from a mole, and given the circumstances, that could only be one person. Meanwhile, back at the guild, Viper is laughing his butt off because of how stupid he made Sylphid and Danuske look, and he couldn't have done it without Nea's help, so he praises her for being such a good backstabber. Nea thanks him with a deadpan expression on her face because she was just doing as she was instructed, but she's a bit curious as to how Viper managed to hide all that gem, so she asks where he put it. Viper's expression turns cold, and Naya realizes she might have angered him by asking a question, so she tenses up in fear as she prepares to get beaten once again. But fortunately for her, Viper is in a good mood, so he just pats her on the head and tells her he put all the gem in a caravan. Viper used to work with a lot of horse-drawn carriages to transport goods, so using them to temporarily store all the gem was pretty easy. He's going to bring it all back to the guild once he knows it's safe. And speaking of safety, he tells Nea that her parents are still safe for now, but whether they stay safe depends entirely on Nea's actions. Nea was born as part of the Lord Pent family, but her branch was the lowest ranked among them all. So one day, Viper just barged into her parents' home and demanded to take Nea with him because he needed a new secretary. Her parents didn't want to let it happen, but they couldn't refuse orders from the main house, so they were forced to give up their daughter. What followed was constant abuse at the hands of Viper because he didn't like how Nea's face reminded him of his older sister. Then one day he called her into his office and told Nea to become a spy for him. He knew Danuske was a soft-hearted guy, so if he saw a pitiful little girl, he was bound to sympathize with her, no matter how suspicious she was. Nea had no idea what would happen if she were to get caught, but she couldn't refuse Viper's orders for her parents' sake. That afternoon, Danuske takes a stroll through town, and he is disheartened by all the gloomy and hungry people he sees around, so he needs to do something about it. He is so deep in thought that he doesn't notice Olmunder standing right in front of him. She eventually manages to snap him out of it, and Danuske is surprised to see her because he thought the Demon Lord sent her on a mission in the north. Olmunder says he's right, but she just got back and she brought back some souvenirs too. She was sent up north to deal with some wyverns that were terrorizing the villages there, and wyverns are huge, deadly creatures, so it wasn't easy. She managed to take out 30 wyverns altogether, and she brought them back with her as trophies of her victory. Danuske thinks about what Olmunder just told him, and it gives him a great idea, so he tells her she's amazing. Olmunder blushes a little from Danuske's compliment, but Danuske has already started working on logistics. 30 wyverns should be more than enough for what he is planning, so he has finally come up with a solution to their guild problem. This was the end of episode 8. Subscribe to not miss the next part.